Hello, my name is Bogdan-Andrei Iancu, and I am the founder and core developer for the OpenSIPS project. This is the second year speaking for the TAD Asia, and of course I will focus again on OpenSIPS project, but this time from a completely different perspective. What I will do, I will share with you first what OpenSIPS is, but the most important part is how OpenSIPS impacts the VoIP world, especially in the Asian area. So starting with what OpenSIPS is. First of all, it is an open source project of a very generic SIP server. And if we are to look at how much traffic the OpenSIPS instances across the world are handling, I would say it is one of the most used open source SIP servers in the world. I think on most of the continents, maybe except Antarctica, there are thousands of OpenSIPs handling maybe millions, billions of calls every day. But what makes OpenSIPS such a successful SIP server? Well, there are two main aspects. First of all, as already mentioned, it's a generic SIP server, which means basically it's a programmable SIP server. You have a very powerful SIP stack. You have a lot of modules providing different kind of functionalities, but at the end of the day, it's up to you to configure in a programmable, in a scriptable way, what actually OpenSIPS should do whenever SIP traffic is received. So there are no predefined ways of acting. You just have a bunch of features that you can glue together into the script and program your service logic into OpenSIPS. So basically, you can have OpenSIPS doing whatever you want to do with the SIP traffic. Besides being so programmable, the second important attribute of OpenSIPS is the fact that it's a very, very powerful tool. Powerful in terms of throughput. Using a single OpenSIPS instance on a quite regular or decent server, you can get like thousands of calls per second, or hundreds of thousands of simultaneous calls being handled in real times. So these two attributes, the programmability and secondly the throughput of OpenSIPS, made it a very popular SIP engine to be used when it comes to implementing different kind of SIP platforms. That was a very short introduction in what OpenSIPS is, but let's take a look at how actually OpenSIPS impacts the telecom, or let's say the most generically saying the communication world. First of all, as already mentioned, OpenSIPS is an open source software released under the GPL license. That means everyone can take the sources, they can use OpenSIPS for free. There are no licenses to be paid, and that's quite a disruptive concept for the telecom world, because so far in the telecom area we are used with the concept of buying licensing, owning software, building the businesses around proprietary licenses, software. So having now an open source potential software to be used is quite unusual. Most of the telecom companies do not see the fact that right now the value for a solution, it's not necessarily residing in the actual license, so basically owning the code, having a closed code that you are working on, but actually resides in the knowledge of using, in the knowledge on how to build a solution, how to use it, how to configure it. Basically, that's a particularity of OpenSIPS. The fact that when you build a solution with OpenSIPS, most of the value resides actually in the configuration file, in the so-called script that you use to describe how the SIP traffic is handled, and not necessarily in the code. The code it's for free. It's shared between the all the users, among the community. Nevertheless, what may make you give you a special value, makes you an specific service, it's actually the configuration file. So this open source, it's a bit different. Again, it's about knowledge and it's not about the code, and that's a problem that most of the project managers or business managers fail to understand to a certain point. They are used in owning, so basically not sharing the softwares they are using, and that's a bit scary for them, because again it's breaking the whole concepts that they had so far about the value of a business residing in the software or in the licensing that you own. On the other hand, they fail to see the value of the open source. So okay, on one side you share, so you lose value in terms of business because you don't own the software, but on the other hand, there are a lot of advantages when it comes to using the open source software, advantages that actually can boost your business even more than owning licenses. And these advantages are the fact that the open source projects, first of all, are very dynamic in terms of evolving, and when it comes to sharing, you do not share only the code, you share with the rest of the users and community. You share also the effort for developing, so introducing a new feature to enhance the software. You share also the effort in testing the software, and also the effort of fixing the software. So in the open source model, everybody's doing a ton of the effort, but everybody's taking advantage of the whole result, and that's something very, very important for whoever is deciding to use OpenSIPS, because again, it's a completely different model versus what we were used so far in buying a software and make we just have a vendor, and we are simply tied to that vendor. Here it's completely different, because you buy actually you don't buy the software, you just take the software. Eventually you may buy, or you can accumulate by yourself the knowledge on how to use it. You can build the solution and or your platform, and you share the effort in terms of maintaining, troubleshooting, testing and fixing the software with the whole community of this open source. So in terms of the investment that you have to do when it comes to using open source, it's very, very reduced. Not to mention that once you get into the open source world, you get out what is called a vendor trap. You don't depend on a single vendor like when you buy a proprietary solution, because around open source there are a lot of businesses, companies working around. It is quite a misunderstanding of the open source area, saying, okay, there are no businesses, nobody is doing business around open source. That's completely wrong. Open source is just the model for working and in a shared environment on a code. But still there are like businesses around the project, the open source projects, businesses that contribute to the projects in terms of manpower, on testing, on developing and so on, and in the same time they build solutions on such open source projects. So automatically, being multiple businesses involved into the whole open source ecosystem, you have potentially multiple vendors. So you don't have this trap of a single vendor providing you with a solution that you may be locked with for the rest of your life. So I would say definitely there are like major advantages for going and using open source software in the telecom world, because to summarize, I would say that the whole value will go in understanding and in using, so in configuring the software. And on the other hand, you don't have to pay licenses, and you are part of let's say a sharing environment when it comes to making the software better. And not to mention, at the end, there is no vendor trap. That's one aspect of this disruptiveness of OpenSIPS, the fact that it's an open source model. And even now, after I would say almost 20 years, we still see a lot of struggling of the telecom world in adopting the open source model. Nevertheless, as in a very popular Syria, resistance is futile. Why? Because at the end of the day, everybody understands, comes to an understanding over the advantages of the open source world, and the acceptance of the open source. It's driven actually bottom up from the engineers, from the technical people working with the software and trying to integrate, to build solution on. They see the value, and they escalate the fact that, okay, we should use this, all the way to the management chain. And at the end, all the project managers, all the decision makers, directors, CEOs, or whatever, they will understand the actual advantage of the open source. Yeah, open source is one of the attributes of actually one of the disruptive factors of OpenSIPS. The second one is actually how versatile OpenSIPS is, basically how you use it. And as I said in the very beginning, OpenSIPS is not about a specific model to be used or scenario to be used for handling SIP traffic. Basically, OpenSIPS is so versatile because, of course, you can program it to behave in different in whatever way you want. So you can use it to implement whatever components of a SIP infrastructure. Basically, you can use OpenSIPS to implement a full VoIP infrastructure, because so far in the telecom area, people were used to work with appliances. I just buy some units, rack units. I buy the hardware, I put the hardware over there, and I know that I have an SBC. Or I buy a different hardware, I put it in a different rack, and I can use it, configure it, whatever, as, let's say, a trunking system. But that's it, it's a trunking, and I cannot do anything else with it. So that's a kind of a trap when it comes to the appliances. They are well defined, but you cannot change what to do with them. On the other hand, with OpenSIPS, you can take the software, which is again free licensed. You can learn about it, and yes, that's something that you have to invest a bit into, learning how to use. But you should not be afraid of that, because with the OpenSIPS community, learning can be, I wouldn't say easy, but you'll be assisted and supported by a lot of people. There are mailing lists where you can, you can seek for advices, you can seek for help, or share concerns of problems that you may have. In the same time, we run trainings, so you can participate to an OpenSIPS bootcamp. In these days, we do these trainings online, of course. Until 3 years ago, we were doing in-class trainings, but we have intensive bootcamp trainings to help people to go over the introduction in terms of how to use OpenSIPS. Because once you get all the bits and tricks about how to use, how OpenSIPS works, then you will discover that basically there are no limits in terms of configuring OpenSIPS to do a different kind of services or implementing different kind of platforms. So closing a bit of a large parenthesis here. OpenSIPS, it's versatile. You can easily go over the learning step, but once you master how to use OpenSIPS, then you will discover that actually you can use it for, again, implementing all the elements of a typical SIP infrastructure. So it doesn't really matter what is the purpose of using SIP for your business. You'll find that OpenSIPS can do it for you. So it's a proper tool to solve your need. Just taking examples, with OpenSIPS you can implement different kind of session borders controllers, SBC, basically whatever means of interconnecting. And there are different flavors here. You can have user-oriented SBC. user-related particularities, like you need something to take care of the NAT traversal on the user side, to do protocol conversion, to do security checks, maybe traffic throttling, and so on and so on. So whatever it's specific to an end user interconnection SBC, OpenSIPS can do it. Also, SBCs specific to telecom, let's say telecom interconnection, telco interconnection. So in that case, again, OpenSIPS with a different configuration can help you. You can adapt the configuration in order to do all the specifics for telco interconnection. Codec negotiation, maybe different kind of particularities in terms of SIP stack implementation, authentication, validation of traffic, and so on. So everything, all these are possible with OpenSIPS using it as an SBC. Lately, in the last year, there is a quite, let's say, good usage of OpenSIPS when it comes to using as an SBC for MS Teams, for Microsoft Teams. Because again, the flexibility that you have in OpenSIPS helps you actually to address all the particularities, and because it's Microsoft, there are plenty of how SIP works with Teams. So that's another kind of solution that OpenSIPS can address. Moving forward with what kind of solutions OpenSIPS can do. It's the typical trunking systems or wholesale systems, basically routing huge amount of traffic between carriers or trunks. And OpenSIPS is the best tool for that because it is, as we said in the very beginning, programmable, so you can actually cover whatever kind of features where you want, or any kind of crazy particularities in terms of traffic routing in your platform. And secondly, it can handle a lot of traffic, so tens, hundreds of thousands of calls, simultaneous calls going through the platform. So it's very easy to become unique on the market, because you have this flexibility to go and program to quickly address whatever needs may pop up from your customer, and be all the time the first in the market delivering new services or addressing new problems. That's what OpenSIPS does. Then after this kind of trunking solutions, you can look into more complex things for OpenSIPS. For example, playing the role of a typical Softswitch to deliver VoIP services to residential customers or to SMB customers. So typically customers, they simply do need to make calls with certain feature, maybe a call forward, to be able to terminate or receive calls from the PSTN side, but everything in a single tenant, so basically without multi-tenant support. That's what is typically called a soft switch. And OpenSIPS can really play here the role, both in terms of the actual VoIP services, also providing all the, let's say, under the hood, so more like a provider-oriented features like high availability, integration with databases, integration with web services through APIs and so on. So all these are possible with OpenSIPS. Not to mention the clustering support provided by OpenSIPS that allows you to actually run platforms, whatever platforms, SBCs, trunking, Softswitches, Virtual PBXes, and so on, in geo-distributed model. So all the POPs, all the data centers where you have presence may run OpenSIPS instances, but in the same time they share all the data about the calls, about the users. So they act as a single service. So for the end user, it really doesn't matter where they do connect, in which location. They will see exactly the same service. So just keep in mind that OpenSIPS, it's not only just a powerful SIP stack, but all the additional, let's say, functionalities like being able to connect to various SQL databases, being able to connect to various NoSQL databases, being able to handle caching data, interacting with external services like using REST clients, the ability to cluster. All these are present in OpenSIPS, and they are valuable tools when it comes to building services. And in terms of what you can do with OpenSIPS, I would say the most complex service that you can do with OpenSIPS is the virtual hosted PBX system. And why I say it's complex? Because it's also complex from the kind of a SIP services that you can do over there. Like you can do starting from simple call forwarding, hand groups, call pickups, call transfers. You can do barging for the with OpenSIPS. You can do call plans in order to restrict the dialing. You can do complex routing and so on, fraud detection, and many services which are typically, let's say, maybe class 5 oriented from SIP perspective, but also advanced features which are typically needed for large customer, typical tenants, let's call them. And all this complexity on the SIP side, it's combined with the complexity as again infrastructure, like clustering, doing high availability with full redundancy, being able to integrate with other infrastructures, for example, with APIs in order to provision your system, or integrating with events systems in order to notify external watchers about what's going on the SIP system, like okay, maybe some user has a new voicemail, or maybe a new call it started, and so on. And a very useful component, the calling API. So OpenSIPS is not only driven by the incoming outgoing traffic, but can be driven SIP traffic, but can be also driven by API calls and start SIP traffic. Like you can have APIs to start commands, to start calls, to terminate calls, to transfer calls, and so on. So you can combine again all these in order to get a very complex virtual PBX solution. So I would say, trying to summarize, OpenSIPS brought quite some disruptions on the VoIP and telecom world. First, by the with the open source aspect of it, because again, it's a quite atypical, quite difficult to understand model for the existing telecom people. And secondly, because OpenSIPS is not an appliance, it's a software that you can configure and you can build various solutions, voice over IP solutions. So it's not only one. When you say OpenSIPS, it's not only SBCs or only trunking. It's basically any kind of voice over IP or SIP solution. We have an for the OpenSIPS, because as you see, OpenSIPS, it's about open source, it's about sharing, it's about communities. We already mentioned that we have the trainings, but we have also the OpenSIPS Summit, where we meet with the community. It's a point for the community to get together to share information and to plan how OpenSIPS should evolve in the future, because OpenSIPS is a community-driven project. And during these summits, we learn how OpenSIPS is used by other people, how it's addressing different kind of needs in different areas of the world. And we see more and more presence or need in the Asia area, especially when it comes of replacing appliances. Replacing appliances as typical infrastructure services like load balancers, like trunking system or SBCs, because different kind of integrators in the Asia area, they do understand the value of open source, mainly as being a very, very versatile option when it comes to building SIP services. And they do build services for the local Asian markets. And they started for identifying these typical, again, scenarios like balancing traffic distribution, session border controllers. So I would say they are experimenting at this point with, let's actually use open source into our infrastructure. We are looking forward to see a wider acceptance on the Asian market for more complex solutions. The solutions are there already in the OpenSIPS community. We have a lot of discussions about how to do that. So there is a lot of knowledge already existing on these topics. But again, we would like to see a transfer of knowledge also through these through the Asian areas. In the last training, we had a quite good ratio of people, not only from typical Europe, US, but also from Asia, from Australia area. So more and more people again exploring and seeing the benefits of using OpenSIPS as an open source alternative in the telecom world. But again, to a certain point, it's about mentality. It's about a disruptive approach on what the markets are used to as licensing, as appliances, and all these. But at the end of the day, you know, one by one, I think all these concerns will be overcome. In the meanwhile, the OpenSIPS community, it's there for you to help. We have, again, the trainings. We have the summit, the OpenSIPS Summit event, where you can see what you can do with OpenSIPS. So a lot of possibilities for you to explore and to see if OpenSIPS it's the right tool for you. If you are not sure about that, anytime drop us an email. We will be more than happy to help you with that. So thanks again to Alan for the opportunity to again share you some important bits and pieces about OpenSIPS this year, and yes, waiting to see the evolution in the Asian market also. Thank you.